The quickest way to feel better about your body is to stand next to a softer man. That's also one of the quickest ways to stay exactly where you are, because the comparison that does the most damage isn't always the one that makes you feel behind. Sometimes it's the one that makes you feel relieved. And if you're looking for another podcast that's going to tell you being better than average is enough, this isn't it. This is Iron Suits, where strength wears a crown. I am Marwan Killu. I've been thinking a lot about comparison lately, and I think we sort of misunderstood it a little bit. See, I don't think most men lower their standards. I think they quietly replace them. And one of the easiest ways that happens is through comparison. Because we hear the same thing all the time, don't we? Comparison is a thief of joy. Don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself with who you were yesterday. Okay? Compare yourself to your own potential and all that shit. And look, I don't think comparison is a problem. Otherwise, how do you know what's possible? How do you know whether you're improving? Okay. The problem isn't comparison. It's the direction you're looking. When you compare up, you see somebody leaner than you, stronger than you, further ahead than you. That comparison can be uncomfortable. But I don't think that's a comparison keeping most men stuck. I think the most dangerous comparison is the one below you, the one that lets you breathe out, the one that says, I'm all right. Look around. No, I'm doing better than most men my age. You ever notice what happens after a round of golf? You're in the locker room. You and a few of your buddies are getting change, not change. One is talking about his cholesterol. Another says his doctor doubled his statins. Somebody else laughs because his chiro reckons 18 holes is pushing it now. You all laugh. The conversation just carries on. It's almost like collecting diagnoses has become a badge of honor. Because once you get into late 40s, 50s, bad backs, bigger waists, statins, it all just becomes part of the conversation. Now, here's what's interesting. There is a decent chance that same morning you're standing in your own bathroom, looking in the mirror, and you're thinking, fuck, when did that happen? Because if you're honest, you haven't liked what you've been seeing for a while. You turn sideways, your stomach gets there before the rest of you. You suck it in, it still sticks out. You let it go, it drops. You look at your chest, it's puffy, man boobs. You catch yourself thinking, I used to have edges. Now I've got curves. You stand up straighter, take half a step back, as if the extra distance might change something. Maybe the mirror in the other bathroom is better. Same body, different mirror. And somewhere in your heads, the negotiation starts. It's not that bad. I still train. Things will calm down in a couple of weeks. A few hours later, you're at the golf club. Your polo comes off. You look around. One of your buddies is fighting with the next hole on his belt. And now that's completely lost shape through his chest. You still look like you train. You're in better shape than most of them. And for the first time all day, you feel better. Without even realizing it. Without even realizing why. The room becomes a standard. The thought that you had this morning, or the thought that you had in the bathroom that morning, I'm doing better than most men my age. Not because your body changed, because your standard did. And I think that's the part that most men never notice. The room became the standard, not in one decision, in hundreds of little negotiation. Because I've never met a man who woke up one morning and decided, today is the day I lower my standards. Like, nobody decides that. One day, you stop asking yourself, am I the man I wanted to become? And you start telling yourself, I'm doing better than most men my age. But those two are two completely different conversations. I want you to think back to when you were 25, maybe even 30. You knew exactly what you wanted. The six-pack, bigger arms, chest that looked like you trained. Okay? Can you see what's happened? The scoreboard changed, not your body. And once that changed, the game changed with it. Because now, every softer man you stand next to makes you feel a little bit better. Every time you compare down, the finish line moves another inch until one day, average feels successful. You didn't stop chasing excellence. You just kept moving the finish line until average became enough. Neville Goddard, if you guys have heard of him, he's got one massive book, The Ultimate Collection. I've forgotten the name of the book. I've got it back at home. It's very, very interesting book. He used to talk about living from the end, seeing the results before the evidence arrives. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you already understand the idea. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, before you build the business, you could see it. Before the Rolex, you knew the reference number. Before the G-Wagon, you knew the spec. You had the picture, before you had the proof. So here's what I don't understand. When did you stop doing that with your body? Because at one point, you knew exactly what that man looked like. You didn't need to compare yourself to anybody. That image, a mental image, was already there. And somewhere along the way, you stopped looking at it and started looking around the room. That's when the standard changed. And maybe that's why you keep looking around the room. Because looking at the picture you once had would force a very different conversation. You would have to admit you're not where you wanted to be. Not where you said you'd be. Maybe not even close. And that's uncomfortable. So comparison creeps in and quietly does its job. It softens the verdict. You don't have to ask, Does his body represent me? You ask, is it better than his? One question demands honesty. The other demands somebody softer. The other just demands somebody softer. And that's a much easier question to answer. Because there's always somebody softer, somebody heavier, somebody taking more medication, somebody who stopped training years ago. You can always find somebody who makes your decline look reasonable. But is that really the fucking man you're measuring yourself against? I don't think comparing down is confidence. I think it's relief. And relief can become addictive. Because every time the mirror asks something uncomfortable, you look sideways. Find somebody doing worse. And the question disappears. At least I'm not as bad as him. Listen to that sentence again. At least I'm not as bad as him. Is that your fucking standard now? That's not a standard. That's damage control. You're no longer asking whether you're proud of what you've built. You're asking whether somebody else has let himself go more than you have. And as long as the answer is yes, you get to feel okay. Not proud, not fulfilled, okay. And that's what comparison has been given you. Not evidence that you're doing well, but permission not to look any closer. Like in my gym, the gym that I go to, every single person, the time that I go to the gym, every single person, I kid you not, my age or above, looks in dog ass shape. And I mean that. I mean that. And that's the God honest truth. They're in dog ass shape. Like they got bellies hanging over their shirts. Man boobs, soft. We call it whatever, right? And I look at these people and I'm like, gosh, so I have to find people that are younger. I have to compare myself with the kids, right? I look at the kids, I'm thinking, wow, he looks good, right? I want to keep up with the kids, because if I look at the guys who are my age, like it makes me feel better. They'll say, oh, at least I don't look like him. But I don't ask myself the question. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay, but there are still people who are doing way better than me. I look at the people who are better than me, especially with my body or with everything, even my body, because that's the standard that I want, right? I want to get better standards. You do the same with your business. I don't know why your body is any different. Anyway, so I compare myself with my 19-year-old boy who trains. I don't try and compete with him, like literally compete with him, try and match his numbers. That's just not going to happen. These guys live by a different rule. And if I try to compete with him, then the results might not be favorable in terms of like what happens to my joints and stuff. Anyway, maybe that's why I've not liked I digress. Maybe that's why I've never liked the phrase better than most. Because better than most, according to who? Most men? The same men who gave up years ago? The same men who've convinced themselves that soft is just what happens after 40? The same men who laugh about statins like they've earned them, why would they ever be your measuring stick? And like I said earlier, the strange thing is, you would never run your business that way. You'd never benchmark your company against the weakest competitor in the market. You would never tell your team, we're doing better than most. Don't worry about improving. You would ask, where can we improve? And you wouldn't look at your sales numbers and think, yeah, great, great job, take a day off tomorrow, lower your standards. Why does your body get a different scorecard? Why is the one thing carrying all of this allowed to be measured against men you don't even want to become? Maybe that's a real trap. Comparison didn't change how you saw your body. It changed who you were asking for permission. Once average men become your judges, like, average is the only verdict you're going to get. So next time you hear yourself say, I'm doing better than most men my age, don't ask if it's true. Ask yourself something much more uncomfortable. Are those men even the men you want to become? Or are they just the men you've been hiding behind? That's all from me today. Make sure you follow me on my socials, and I'll see you on the next episode.